Hello. The short film you are about to see has been put together by young people. It is the second phase in a project called 100 Years of the Women Franchise in Britain. During the first phase of the project, the young people were involved in conducting some research and putting together an exhibition which was displayed at the Brent Council offices. In this second phase, the young people interviewed some of the Brent councillors as well as some of the Brent staff. I want to thank the young people who have been involved. I want to thank the Brent councillors as well as the Brent staff. I also want to thank the workshop facilitators as well as our own staff, the past and present, who have actually been involved. And I also like to express some gratitude to the Brent Museum for giving us the space to display the exhibition. I hope you enjoy watching.
So can you tell us about your background / career?
Yeah, so I've done quite a lot of different things in the past. I'm part qualified accountant. I've spent a lot of time working in accountancy and finance, and I was invited to become a councillor for Brent Council, which I did for 4 years between 2010 to 2014.
I worked for a local voluntary organisation for a number of years. My training, I trained to be a personal assistant, so I worked with various directors in Brent for over 21 years.
I started off in politics as an activist. It was around the time of the Iraq War, and I started getting involved in protests against some of that, I think around 2004. And when a lot of other people were leaving the Labour Party because of that, because Tony Blair was leader at the time, I decided to do the opposite and join it.
Before I became a councillor, I was a secondary school teacher. I used to teach history and some RE and geography in a local school in Brent. And then I joined the Labour Party in 2011, and I stood for elections for the 2014 local elections then. And I was lucky enough to be elected in the ward of Frighton in Brent.
And I myself went through a lot of discrimination as a woman, and that gave me I suppose it was anger almost, that I'm going to fight for women's rights. In 1995, I returned to live in London as an adult and continued my work with women's health, and then stood to be elected as a councillor in 2002, and I have been a councillor now for 13 years.
I've worked in places like the Science Museum, the London Transport Museum, the British Museum, always thinking about how we engage different audiences. And then I got this job at the end of 2018. I started in January, and what really excited me was working with the young people in Brent in northwest London, which is where I grew up, looking at culture in the widest possible sense, working with young people across a whole borough rather than just in one organisation.
So how has the work you do positively impacted women's rights?
My role, I see, is trying to get other people involved, especially young people. So I feel that as a councillor and in the council, we need to represent the people that we are representing. So therefore you need to have people from African community, Caribbean community, Asian, Afghan, East Europeans are coming in now, Portuguese. We need to have that.
I participate much more with women's groups. I listen to women's concerns. I try to find new ways of doing things and try to move away from where women may have suffered inequalities in the past, learning lessons from past histories, and just basically treating women as I'd want myself to be treated.
From my perspective, I deal with community safety, and a massive part, in fact, we've done something here that I got to introduce, which was to have kind of early intervention advocates for people in those kind of toxic relationships. And what that means is that people get a voice to speak for them and to help them through the system. It makes people much more likely to get a complaint in early. It makes them much more likely to deal with their partner. It makes them much more likely to adapt their own life circumstances. And so over the last year, violent incidents against women, more of them have been reported, but we have far fewer injuries that have resulted from it. So
in Brent, we are very keen to make sure that our councillors and all our committees are equally represented as much as possible. So our cabinet, for example, is 50-50 in split. And also in my particular role in regeneration, there's very few women in the role. And so I make sure that wherever I can, I talk about women's equality, women's rights in terms of representation. And I also make sure that as much as I can that our staff in the council are representative of women.
As a councillor, it still has an impact because I do casework. So the people who live in my ward, they know that I'm an elected representative. They come to me with all sorts of issues, and I do get a lot of women who come to me. We have issues of domestic violence, where women are subjected to physical abuse, psychological abuse, economic abuse, and they come to me for help. They need housing, they need a refuge to go to. I have women who are not able to get jobs because they don't have the confidence at interviews. So then I refer them to the voluntary sector, and I say, these organizations do training of people of how to interview, how to apply for a job, how to dress for an interview, how to speak at an interview, how do you write a job application, how do you write a CV. So I come across it quite a lot.
When I think about it, the world of like creativity and arts and culture, there are lots of women in it, but there aren't many women in leadership roles. If you look at senior people within cultural organisations, they usually tend to be men. And that's many reasons for that. So I like to think that being a youngish woman, not completely young, a youngish woman in the arts and culture sector, working with young people to inspire them to see the impact that culture can have on your own lives, but also on a community, the positive impact of it, that they might see themselves within this industry, and that hopefully that they would progress through it. And eventually, I'm not saying we get rid of men at the top, but there's an equality of men and women at the top of cultural organisations.
Have you, in any point of your career, have you like experienced any sort of like inequalities like firsthand?
For gender equality?
Yeah, gender equality.
Yes, I think when I first took on this role of cabinet member for Regeneration, I often have meetings with developers and people working in big companies and so on who want to build things in Brent. And quite often they're surprised that I'm a woman and that I know what I'm talking about. So when I'm talking about building sites, or when I'm talking about how planning and that kind of thing, like, oh, right, we didn't realise you knew that. I said, yes, I do know that.
I don't think I have directly, but I think there are perceptions that are made around men and women. So 19 months ago, I became a mother. About 3 years before that, I got married, and I know in my previous organisations, you assume if someone's got married, they're going to have a baby. Obviously, one gender has a baby, that happens to be women. So a lot of presumptions were probably made about my progression within an organisation. So I don't think it was directly, I think it was a subconscious thing, and it's something that I've become aware of since having a baby as well. People assume there's certain things you can and can't do.
I wouldn't say I've faced it, but I think sometimes as a woman, there's expectation. When I was coming up back in the day, there is an expectation of women's role and men's roles. Now, women's football, it's commonplace. We're all celebrating it, we're all loving it. When I was growing up, that wasn't heard of. That wasn't a woman's game. Football, tennis, you've got Serena Williams, Venus Williams. You would never have a black woman in that role, but they've held that role for X amount of years.
I've faced lots of different forms of inequalities. I wouldn't say specifically the opposite gender inequalities. I definitely believe that inequality is a wider concern, a wider issue for society. When people don't understand or they have a fear, the barriers go up, there's a wall, and it feels like it's very difficult to penetrate. And so the main thing I fear when I've seen any form of inequality is, why do people not understand or listen or try to appreciate?
There are things in politics, and particularly I would say within my party, the Labour Party, whereby we've taken measures to try and equal out what was an unequal situation before. So there will be seats that come up in campaigning groups or even to be a councillor, where there'll be places that are reserved for women. Probably a minority of our members would have a problem with that because they feel like they're being kind of positively discriminated against. But the way that I see that really is that it was the system as it was before that was discriminating against people. If you come at things from the perspective that men and women are equal and that we all have equal worth, to have a system which was electing loads of men and not women showed that there was something wrong with it. And I think that's really just about putting things right and giving people an equal opportunity, really, to succeed and make the best of themselves. So no, I don't generally think that men do suffer discrimination because of their gender, except in extremely limited circumstances.
Do you think it's as bad, or do you think we're getting closer to equality?
It's definitely improved. I've been here since 1995, so it's almost 20, 30 years. I can see the difference in that 20, 30 years. There's much more opportunity for the younger generation, younger women. Younger women are very aware of their rights, which is wonderful. They are learning more and more to assert their rights, because knowing your rights is one thing, but are you ready to assert them and say, if you think that there's an injustice being done, are you willing to stand up and say, sorry, this is not acceptable?
In some ways we are, but in some ways I don't think we're doing enough practically. I think there's a lot more of a clearer message to promote women's rights and certainly to try to tackle inequality. You know, in my party we're nearing equal representation. I think that there's much more of a voice for women in that sense, whether it's in the media, whether it's in politics, wherever else. And I think as a society we've really benefited out of that. Some of my best colleagues here at the council are women, and some of the finest people that I've worked with in politics.
I would like to say yes, but I think there's a long way to go before we're truly equal. I think the gender pay gap really highlights kind of where women are. I think the fact that a lot of the caring responsibilities still fall on women rather than men. So when you're looking for careers, there's always women having to juggle everything, whereas men don't have to have that worry about what they're juggling with. And you see it in interviews, and you see it I get asked the question, how are you juggling all of this together? Because I'm a single parent. But you wouldn't get that same question asked of men.
Just thinking about how society is changing, do you feel that the younger generation are more accepting of women in power versus the older generation?
100% yes. I'm very lucky, I think. Well, I'm 33, and I think it's people my age and a bit younger. There's been a massive new wave, I think, of young people who identify themselves as feminists. I think that there have obviously been waves of feminism throughout history which all of these people stand on, but I think there's been a real renewed interest in that in the last sort of 4 or 5 years, and I'm really pleased about that.
Yeah, I think it's what you're used to, what you see around you. So I know when I was growing up, I lived in a traditional household. My mum and dad both worked, but my mum also did all the cleaning and all the cooking and picked me up from school and dropped me and did all that kind of stuff. Whereas I know that in my relationship with my husband, we're doing everything quite equally. We do pick-ups, drop-ups, cooking, cleaning. And I guess I'm not saying that we're a younger generation, but we're doing it differently from our parents. And I think the generations below us will see that. So I know my son will grow up seeing that mum and dad did everything. So there's that equality is just what you're used to.
So younger people are becoming more comfortable with the idea that women have the same rights.
The world I grew up in is completely different from the world that I grew up in the sense that now it's all technology based. You see women in bigger roles, they are leading characters. You see women, pure women presenters, we never used to see that before. Women having serious discussions about various things, whether it be football, whether it be politics, whether it be about business, it's there.
I think younger people are more open to that conversation. I think they're more attuned to the fact that equal representation is for everyone, it isn't just for one particular group. I think my experience of being a teacher, and also my daughter's 10 years old, from very young they're taught about equality in terms of women can do anything, men can do anything.
It has to start from the family. So parents have to bring up their children, the boys and the girls, in an equal way. So equal education with equal opportunities. If girls want to go into any sort of particular career, they shouldn't be told, no, 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 you shouldn't do that. You should be a teacher or something. You shouldn't be a footballer, you know, things like that. So it starts from the family. It starts from schools, colleges, universities. It's from the society and the community as a whole. But I am quite hopeful that your generation will be fighting for it, continue to fight for it, and will achieve it.
In what ways do you think politics today can help improve equality for women?
I'm going to go back to the motherhood thing recently, because there's been a few MPs recently that have become mothers and have struggled to hold their political roles, in the sense that they're not paid maternity leave. They are paid their full salary, but they can't take time out. And if they take time out, they're not there for their constituents, because maternity leave in that way isn't part of politics, and that's because politics has always been male dominated, so no one ever had to think about it. You've had people like Tulip Sadiq, you know, going in with her baby to vote because otherwise her vote would not have been counted.
Well, everything we do is politics, I think, is the first thing that I want to say. I get really frustrated when people think of politics as, oh, it's those people in Parliament, or it's something that I saw on the news, or it's kind of a TV thing that's a long way away from me. No, politics is how much we pay in price for, you know, a pint of milk. It's where we're allowed to drive, walk or run, what our public transport's like is politics, whether we have a community centre, what we get paid. All of these questions that really define most minutes we spend living or breathing are political questions. What can politics do to help women? Well, all of those things have a gender aspect to them, right? We talked a little bit just before about going to work and about equal pay. Well, if you want to have equal pay and you're in the business of changing that, that is politics.
I think we have to have policies that ensure equal pay is a very, very important thing. If a person, man or woman, is doing the same job as someone else, man or woman, they should get the same pay. It shouldn't be that a man gets more pay and a woman gets less pay. So equality in pay, politicians have to ensure that through legislation, through the parliament, through law, and enforcement of the law. So it's no use having a law if it's not enforced.
To improve something, you need to be inside. I always say that you should join the Labour Party, because I'm a Labour councillor. If the police, join the police. You need to know how things work. And then from there are various groups. So you've got various affiliate organisations that are, for instance, we've got the Christians on the left, we have the Jewish Labour movement, there's disability movement as well. They bring specific issues relating to their circumstances. They can bring motions, you know, so it's there, equality is there, but it's a case of, I think you need to be in an organisation to actually know how it works, to effect a change.
Politics is very important because politics is the vocal cord. Politics is the voice mechanism to allow discussion and debate. It allows politicians to get involved and to act on behalf of women. Where there's a problem in society, then it's the job of politicians and politics to address those concerns. If there are concerns, they shouldn't be hidden. They should be brought up to debate and for discussion.
What role do you think, especially in this modern day, what role do you think social media has to play into equality between men and women?
Well, it has a big role to play. I mean, I have 2 grandsons, as an example. The older one is 15, the younger one is 13. And everything they do is on social media. I mean, as I'm sure it's very similar to you, is the means of communication is through social media. So I think those people who understand and support equality can use social media in many different ways. It can play a big role, but it also can be quite dangerous, because if social media is not really moderated, so there can be abuse through social media, and that abuse would be of vulnerable people. And that's, I'm not saying that women are vulnerable, but it could be women are vulnerable on social media.
I guess it just gives you lots of different perspectives on how to do things. I don't think there's one right way for equality to happen. I think there's about looking at lots of different ways that it is happening, that people are trying to achieve it, and working out what works for you as an individual, for you within your organisation. And social media makes that accessible across a globe, so how different countries do it, how different people do it. We know there's certain countries in other parts of the world that might not have equality even to the level that we have it, but hopefully young women and men there can be exposed to other ways of doing things, to their thinking to be changed.
Social media is a platform to promote good practice and to definitely encourage much more equality towards women.
It depends. Social media, to me, it's a bit of a mixed bag. It can be very positive, i.e. it can highlight various things. It can highlight various issues happening across the world, to do with women, women's rights, young girls, etc. But at the same time, there's a negative side of it where you get people using the web for certain things to do with young children, certain things to do with young ladies.
I'm not sure that it's made a massive difference to women's rights particularly, but I think it has changed a little bit the landscape of gender and how things affect people. And one of the things that I'd say about that that's really obvious would be in like areas like mental health. Eating disorders, for example, disproportionately affect women, right? And the impact of social media as a transmitter of eating disorders is something that can help to encourage them to get worse has been absolutely terrible, and of course that's primarily affecting women. So there are issues like that that I think have been a real problem. But on the other side, I mean, I really believe in this idea of kind of open debate, but I think that the internet in some ways has made it much harder to have open debate, and social media has.
How do you think we can ensure that there is a fairer society from any kind of discrimination?
A fair society is basically stop looking at women's gender or men and basically look at people to say, can you do this role based on what your knowledge and your experience. If you're a young person, because I faced this when I was coming up, when you're young, to get experience, no one wants to give you experience because you're too young, but they want you to get experience. There should be a door open for young people to enable them to gain that experience they actually need.
In order for us to have a fairer society, we need to recognise what is right and what is wrong. And we also need to take a seat back at times when we think something is not wrong and it's correct, but actually later on in generations to come actually have a different perspective based on the evidence and the information and our knowledge and awareness. Sometimes discrimination can be overlooked because there's a lack of understanding and a deep concern about somebody's situation. For example, where women had suffered in the past, it was quite normal in society to oppress women, to keep women in a domestic form, to say women should be at home, not working. And it took a long time for people to realize that that's just not acceptable, for women to be placed in a position that may not be comfortable for her. It's a woman's choice to decide what they want to do, and it's a woman's choice to decide whether they want to work or to do anything else.
We should all be in our day-to-day lives, not just in the workplace, not just in school, in colleges, the way that we live our lives, the way that we treat each other, that should be there from the beginning. If you look at very young children, discrimination is something, or the way we perceive each other is something that is built in, and it's our the environment around us that will kind of, what you see, I guess, at home or what you hear can affect that. So when we're born and when we're very young, we respond to things in a completely different way. And it's a way of capturing that with young people and keeping that everyone is equal, that we all, you know, should have the same opportunities and the same kind of chances in life, I guess.
Yeah,
so
absolutely.
working out what it is and how we hold on to that as a society and make that part continue throughout society.
We have to understand how everything links up to it. There's this idea of intersectionality. I'm not sure if you've come across the word before. So the idea behind intersectionality, I guess, is that there are multiple levels on which you can be singled out and discriminated against. If you are a black woman, you may have a different experience of life and discrimination to a white woman, but a white woman is obviously going to have a different experience of that to me as a white man. And I think that a lot of this is about us understanding that at all of the levels that we live at, different things can happen, and our identities really are that complex that often as individuals we experience things completely differently to other people.
It's having equal opportunity. Not everyone will take an opportunity because that's human nature and everyone is different. But the equal opportunities has to exist. So for instance, if you want to go into the film industry, you should be able to have that opportunity, and it should be an equal opportunity to a young man going in down that path.
Do you think positive discrimination is the answer?
I wouldn't even call it that, because I think that it's I think that it's resetting the balance. I think it's destroying discrimination that was there, so I wouldn't even necessarily call it discriminatory. Is it successful? Absolutely yes. I think it's something that needs to be defended. We do need to think a little bit about why we ended up in that situation. Firstly, you know, other political parties aren't really doing this policy. I think that's a problem. It's up to them to decide what they want to do, but I'd recommend it because it's unlocking the talents of loads of people that we wouldn't have otherwise heard from. There's tremendous wealth in there.
So,
some people try to use positive discrimination as a way to highlight and showcase that discrimination takes place with a particular group. Now, that could be a good way forward if you want to highlight a particular group to promote awareness. But I don't agree with positive discrimination because, in my opinion, positive discrimination seems to suggest that a group that has suffered or has struggled with discrimination or, you know, any form of, you know, dislike needs to be treated differently. But I don't see the reason why anybody should be treated differently. The whole point of equality is to respect others. The issue is not with the women. The issue is with those people that do not promote women's rights and support women.
It's not a solution for everything, but in order to get people onto a level playing field, you do need to have something there to actually help them get there. Because with the Labour Party, we've got over 50% women in the Labour Party. In 2017, I think it's 119 MPs were women in there. But out of the 119, I think, how many BAME? I haven't got the figures for how many BAME people, how many ethnic people. But I know the first one was Diane Abbott in the 1980s.
I think there's some interesting sort of anecdotes and some interesting research done that men are very good at putting themselves forward, even if they can't do the job, but they'll blag their way into doing something. Whereas women take the time to really understand and analyse and whether they can or can't do it, and they take the time to do it. And I think women have to get better at putting themselves forward, but I think there needs to be places in the system to say, actually, we need to make sure that women are represented straight away. So, for example, we have in our party, when we have elections, there are some seats that are only women only, because in that area there might be too many men already represented as MPs, and so the party decides, actually, that needs to be an all-woman shortlist. At the council, we have wards that make up the council area in the borough. There has to be at least one woman in every ward.
I used to think it was. I don't think it's that much needed. And we have this conversation within the Labour Party. This is very political now. Is should you have women-only seats? So, for instance, when there's a general election and you have election of members of Parliament, should there be a certain allocation of the number of women, number of seats that would be only women can apply for to stand for election? That's positive discrimination. I don't know whether we need that now. Have we gone past that stage or not? I haven't reached a conclusion. I'm still in the process of thinking about it.
Can you give any advice to young people who aspire to bring about change in politics?
My advice to young people who aspire to bring about change in politics is to definitely get involved, learn and listen, definitely think outside of a box, and always look at, you know, different perspectives.
If you want to go into politics, it's a long haul. It's not a short thing, because change through politics does take time. It doesn't happen overnight. It's getting to know the different political parties, what they stand for, what are their manifestos, choosing your political party, then deciding whether you want to join that political party or not.
As I said before, you need to get involved. Get involved on a grassroots level. Get involved, join the Labour Party. You can join from a young age. I've got a young guy from my church, he's 12. I got him interested in joining Brent Youth Parliament. They take young people from the age of 8. And he's found it interesting. He wouldn't have thought of it. He would not have thought of it, but I kind of said to him, you know, would you like to? And he said yes, and went from there.
I'm reading Michelle Obama's autobiography at the moment, so she's inspiring me a lot. She what she says is that we all matter and what we all think and our voices are really important. And so let's think about the change that we can bring as individuals. So yes, we need politics to change. Yes, we need organizations to change, institutions to change. But that all takes a lot of time. And so let's think about what we can do as individuals to do immediate change and become part of that movement and part of that that change that's happening.
Be involved and don't be worried about other people, you know, judging you for how you speak or how you act or where you come from or any of that. Because, you know, if you're going to be the sort of person that changes things, you've got to understand that at some point, you know, people that don't like what you're saying, they're going to have to put up with you.